The storm rolled in fast that evening, the kind of storm that carried the smell of earth and rain long before the first drop hit the ground. Emily Carter stood on the porch of her late father's ranch house, arms folded, watching the horizon darken. The old boards creaked under her boots, and for a moment she thought she saw a figure moving across the land, a cowboy on horseback, heading straight toward her property. She frowned. Strangers weren't rare, but most travelers had no reason to wander this far. The land wasn't easy. The roads were rough, and the kind of man who showed up unannounced usually brought trouble. The rider slowed as he approached. He swung down from the saddle with a kind of quiet grace, tipping his hat as the wind caught the brim. Dust clung to his long coat, and his boots looked worn from miles of walking trails. "Evening, ma'am," he said, voice deep and steady, like gravel smoothed over by water. Emily tightened her grip on the porch rail. "Can I help you?" "Name's Luke," he replied simply. "Storm's comin' in heavy. Thought I might water my horse, maybe find a place to wait it out." She studied him, her heart pulling in two directions at once. Something about him seemed dangerous, mysterious. His eyes were sharp, guarded, as though he carried years of silence inside. But there was something else there too, something tired, lonely. "You can use the barn," Emily said at last, her tone firm. "That's as far as my hospitality goes for strangers." He nodded, no argument, no protest. Just a quiet thank you. He led his horse toward the barn, leaving her on the porch with 100 questions she couldn't shake. Luke Dawson had been called many things in his life. A drifter, a wanderer, a cowboy with no roots. But the truth, he was the son of a dynasty, heir to Dawson land and cattle, a sprawling empire that covered half the state. For decades, he had everything a man could want: power, money, respect. Yet he hadn't known love in years, not since tragedy stole it from him. So he left it all behind: the suits, the meetings, the endless demands of being Luke Dawson, empire builder. Out here among the dust and stars, he was just another cowboy, a man who blended into the road, a man who didn't have to feel. But standing on that porch, seeing Emily Carter's guarded eyes, something old stirred inside him, something he thought he'd buried with his past. Emily wasn't in the mood for charity. Not anymore. Her father's death left her with nothing but debt and a ranch that was crumbling faster than she could save it. The neighbors whispered she'd sell, that a young woman had no place running cattle in a man's world. Every day she fought to prove them wrong. She didn't have time for mysterious cowboys with sad eyes. And yet, when the storm hit, she found herself peeking out the window, watching him settle his horse, rubbing the animal's neck with a gentleness that surprised her. Later, when thunder shook the house, she heard him singing low in the barn, not a song she knew, but one that carried a weight of longing. The next morning, he was still there. She told herself she should send him on his way. But the fence had broken in the storm, and the cattle were scattered. "You any good with your hands?" she asked, arms crossed. Luke glanced at her, then at the tools by the barn. "I can manage." By sundown, the fence was fixed. The cattle were rounded. And Emily realized the stranger wasn't just handy. He worked like a man who knew what it meant to build something with sweat and calluses. "Thank you," she muttered, handing him a glass of water. "Don't thank me yet," Luke said, half smiling. "That fence'll need more work come winter." Something about the way he said it made her stomach twist. He sounded like a man who'd seen more winters than he cared to count. 2 days turned to weeks. Luke never asked for payment. He worked beside her, ate simple meals at her table, and slept in the barn. Emily told herself it was temporary, that she was just grateful for the help. But late at night, when she lay awake listening to the steady rhythm of rain on the roof, she realized she was listening for something else too. The quiet sound of his voice when he thought no one was near. He never spoke of his past, never shared where he was headed. But the walls he built around himself were tall, and Emily found herself aching to climb them. One evening, as they fixed a broken wheel by lantern light, she caught him staring at the horizon. His jaw clenched, his eyes darkened. "You runnin' from something?" she asked softly. He didn't answer at first. Then, without looking at her, he said, "I ain't runnin'. Just tryin' to forget." Emily knew that feeling. She too carried ghosts, the weight of her father's expectations, the loneliness of fighting battles alone. For the first time, she wondered if this cowboy wasn't so different from her after all. But secrets don't stay buried forever. One hot afternoon, A convoy of black trucks pulled up the dirt road. Men in polished boots and crisp shirts stepped out. They weren't ranch hands. They weren't drifters. They were men of business, and their leader looked directly at Luke. "Mr. Dawson," the man said, "we've been looking for you." Emily froze. Her world tilted. Dawson. She knew that name. Everyone knew it. The Dawsons owned more land than the government. They were practically royalty in the West. Luke didn't deny it. He just lowered his head, as though the truth was a weight he'd been trying to outrun. After the men left, Emily confronted him. "You lied to me." "I never lied," Luke said quietly. "You assumed I was nobody. I let you believe it because it's easier. Out here I can be just a man. Not the Dawson name, not the fortune, not the empire." Her voice broke with anger and betrayal. "So what am I then? Some project. A ranch girl you decided to play cowboy with before returning to your empire." The pain in his eyes was raw. "No, Emily. You're the first thing in years that's felt real." The coup for days, she couldn't look at him. The wound cut too deep. She had trusted him, maybe even begun to love him, and now she felt like a fool. Luke could have left, should have left, but he stayed. He worked the land silent, waiting, hoping. Finally, when the ranch's debt collectors came knocking, Emily realized she couldn't push him away any longer. Alone, she would lose everything. With him, maybe there was hope. She swallowed her pride and whispered, "If you meant what you said, prove it. Don't just be Dawson Money. Be the man who fixed fences and sang to his horse when he thought no one was listening." Luke's chest tightened. No boardroom deal had ever felt like this moment. No victory, no land acquisition, no wealth. This was the fight worth winning. And so he did, not with money, not with power, but with love, patience, and a promise. He stood beside her, weathered storms, rebuilt the ranch, and slowly taught her to believe again. 2 years later, folks would still whisper about it. About the drifter cowboy who turned out to own half the state. About the ranch girl who taught him how to live again. But for Luke and Emily, it wasn't about land or titles. It was about finding love in the most unlikely of places. About healing old wounds and daring to trust again. And every night, as the stars burned over the wide, open land, Luke Dawson would look at Emily Carter and think, "For all I own, she's the only thing I was ever truly missing."